Yo, what up, everybody? You already know Sly K Loco here with another episode of CannaConvos, and today's a special one, man. We got Lambert from Lambert. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you said that right,
All
man.
right. From Grove Bags. He is the chief marketing officer of Grove Bags, and if for everybody out there, if you don't know about Grove Bags, you need to wake on up, man. This is the new technology for curing, and also it keeps your buds to the right humidity. Everything like that. Now, the old stuff that we used to use is jars, right? Everybody had the jars, and you have to go in there, and you have to pop the jar, and you got to let it breathe and all that. Well, the Grove Bags, which I have one right here, Grove Bags, they do not do that. You seal it, and it does everything in there. Now, we'll get more into that, and we'll let Lance explain how that works. But how's your day?
It's good. It's good, man. Been off the road here for a minute. Just got back from the Hawaii Cannabis Expo. Shout out to them. They always throw a great event out there in Oahu. So had some good friends, probably some mutual friends. Like had Jackie 420 was out from Vegas. Will, the Stone Ninja from Doja. So definitely some good old friends in the industry that make it out there too to the island. It's nice.
Good, man. And that and Hawaii, I've been to Hawaii 3 times. I'm going my 4th time this year. That is the spot to be. If you're gonna be like, meeting up with people, there's no better place than Hawaii, right?
Very true. Very true.
And you were in Oahu, right?
Yeah, specifically Oahu. So they have it right there in Honolulu, and this was their 8th annual. There's a bit of growers. We toured a farm up on the North Shore, which was pretty dope. A lot of people don't know that, maybe not quite as rich as like California, Oregon, to a certain extent, Washington, but Hawaii's always had its kind of own scene and its own relationship with the plant, dating back centuries, to be candid, back to the 1800s, which is insane. But
Really?
the interesting thing there, is that they kind of stick true to their cultivars. So I've met families who grow the same plant generation after generation after generation. Growing up in NorCal, man, like we used to back in the 90s, 2000s, we stayed pretty true to a certain group of genetics. But in the last few decades, it's been runts and Skittles and GMO and every kind of cookies and every kind of cake and every kind of ice cream that you can imagine. So I have such a huge respect for someone who does learn how to grow these specific genetics, like this specific plant, not this plant, but then this plant crossed with that plant next year. And then that plant. I mean, all of them are very unique. As a grower myself, I have a huge respect for these guys that just pump out new stuff every year. Cause again, it's tough to learn one type of plant, let alone a different variant of it every season,
Yeah, and one thing that I find is when you're crossing and when you're starting to bring in new genetics into the plant, you start to see characteristics of that other plant that you crossed down the line of cloning. You see, because I haven't I'm not a breeder. I haven't bred yet, but I've done a lot of research and I've cloned and I've been growing for a long time. Well, I had this one plant, this OG Chem, and it's a cross of Chem Dog and OG Kush, right? Chem Dog and OG Kush. Well, when I would clone it, and I did it for I'd say about 4 or 5 runs, I kept cloning it. Characteristics of the mother and the father would start to come out of these clones, right? And so you would get one that's not as tall, one's shorter, one's bushier, more OG than it is sativa side, and I just think it's fascinating. It is fascinating, absolutely fascinating how we could just add genetics in, but then they pop in here, not when you're expecting it or whatever. But over there in Oahu, if they're keeping the OG strains, then they probably still got the weed that smells like skunks, right? Because that weed is almost gone nowadays.
Yeah, they still have. You still, some of the older, like the Maui Wowie and Pineapple Express and stuff we know from yesteryear. They are bringing in some of the newer stuff, the cat piss type, but they do stay pretty true. They don't get too exotic, which is cool. And I agree with you. I mean, you're right. You're talking about the genotype. You have different expressions in genetics. I tell people just to look at, families with multiple children. You see what the first child looks like versus the 4th child. They're coming from the same 2 parents, but you see how it kind of changes over time. Yes. And then you have to take into account, not just the geno, but the pheno. To your point, I'm an outdoor full term. Fortunate being in SoCal, I can do outdoor full term, and all have in the same bed. I'll have one plant that stunts at 8 foot, another one's 9 or 10 foot, which I know that's, the environmental impact on it. So there's so many variables, to your point, that you have to take into account.
So many variables, and it's beautiful how this plant just absolutely will change different from what one plant did, and another
Yeah.
plant will act a little bit different because it's started the mother is popping out or whatever. Like it is crazy, and especially you're in SoCal, right? You said,
Yeah.
and if you took that plant and you took that cut and you put it inside, you'd get totally different, like
Dude, I have a friend who, to your point, I'm just a little garden in the backyard, but I have a friend, Jay. He's a really good guy, raised cannabis out of NorCal. He's about 45 minutes east of Acer Point. So if anyone's ever seen Murder Mountain, or we call it Meth Mountain back home, but like Murder Mountain, the series on Netflix, like he's further inland from where that is. Like you have to drive through there. And I gave him some genetics that I got that happened to fall into my hands of what was pure Durban poison, maybe backbred, but not crossbred Durban poison. And I gave it to him, and man, like he was growing absolute trees because of where he was in that Appalachia. But he surprised me a few times back in the old, like good days of Emerald Cup, back in what we call the Prop 215 days when you could just bring pounds on pounds to the show. I remember he came in and he had a dozen mason jars. He loves messing with me. He brought in a dozen mason jars, and he's like, hey, check out these 3 different cultivars. Let me know what you think and which one you like better. They all had a little different characteristics, but the one I chose, no surprise, was the full term outdoor versus the depth versus the indoor. But the trick of it was at the time, it was all wedding cake. So that kind of gives you an idea of what year that was. But it was all wedding cake. But to your point, he took that same genetic from that same mom and he grew it in 3 different environments, all from an Appalachia standpoint, all on his farm. So it's not like he has one at sea level, one up at Spire Rock. Like it wasn't anything extreme. It's just, it was literally the environment. It was outdoor, hoop, and depth and indoor. Yeah. And I could not believe, to your point, man, just the visually, not only from a taste and from an experiential, but visually how different that plant looked. So it's, people need to experience and do little, to your point, not need to kind of experiment. You don't have to be a geneticist or get into crossing stuff, but just do fun stuff like that. And it's insane to see how this plant acts.
It's beautiful. I think when it comes to growing, as you get the bug, like I did, when I got the growing bug, it grabbed onto me and I just went on. So I started growing and it popped up tents left and right. Now I know to have only enough tents that I can handle because, you know how it is. The new growers, you guys out there, new growers, be careful because it'll happen sometimes where you'll just throw in a bunch of tents and you'll be like, I can handle it. And it's like, well, you still have a life. So you have to, you have a life and you got to take care of the plants. So it becomes a little bit too much. So make sure to keep it within your realms. But within this growing, like I said, with cloning and stuff like that, like you learn how to clone, boom, now you got a new skill. And now you start to see genetics. And with me, the way that I was growing is I read the plant. Always read the plant, whatever the plant says, whatever the plant does, right? So you're watching the plant the whole time. So you start to notice these characteristics that come out. You start to notice these problems that start to happen, HLVD, mites, or whatever it is, and your knowledge base just becomes so much bigger by just growing this plant. I mean, it's basically, it's put all my, for me, all my energy that I would put into something bad into good positivity. You know what I
mean? Yeah. It makes you better because, to your point, and it's definitely good advice for novice growers. You can be as proactive as you want to, but to your point, at some juncture in your growing experience, you're going to have to be forced to be reactive. And like you mentioned, mites is a popular one, mold, powdery mildew. For me, budworms. Like I didn't see a single moth outside, and I don't have lights on at night. But I still ended up finding budworms one year. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I don't want to use neem oil. I don't want to use any sort of synthetic herbicides, pesticides. So I was like, okay, I need to come up with a concoction that I know will keep them at bay. So it was like, I do companion planting, right? So I had tomato and basil and all this stuff already in my bed. Took it all, grinded it all up, put a little cayenne in there, and then just put that in a bottle and spray it on the plant. I'm like, okay, this is everything that those bugs don't like. So I'm just going to cover it in that. And it's all natural. So it's like no harm, no foul. But I had to figure that out in order to make sure that I didn't lose my crop. And again, it's only a pound or two, but that's still, that's still a lot of time and energy, to your point, and investment. I mean, there's cost, that goes in. You're like, I better figure this out quick or else I'm going to be out,
I don't know, to your point, your time. That's one thing that's most important to me is my time, actually, like, because I could have been doing something else, I could have been learning something else. But either way, on the flip side, there is never a waste of time too, because you're learning, man.
Yep.
It's something now, you went through that you went through that, so now budworms. Here you go. Now I wanted to bring that back a little bit, or rewind a little bit. I don't know what budworms are. What are budworms?
So budworms are the offspring of moths and pretty much any variation. So these little
they're
bugs,
just a larva.
yeah, they're just the larva, and they go ahead and hatch them typically on your leaves. And it's usually somewhere between that veg to flower state, right? So you're keeping an eye on everything, but these little guys, they plant them right in. And so all of a sudden you'll be 2-3 weeks away from takedown, and all of a sudden you start noticing this, and you do see a little bit of webbing, a little bit of trace of them, but they actually burrow into the buds. So, it still kind of looks good. You're like, oh, well, this isn't mites, this is that. Then all of a sudden you start taking down. And with the crazy part, the first time I ever experienced them, I do whole plant hanging, and that's tough. Again, for novice growers, like you might only be able to do stem hanging, but I'm like, keep as much on as I can. So I do whole plant, and then you'll start seeing them dropping off, coming down off it. So
really,
trick I learned, yeah, it's insane, man. And there, some people have their opinion of what to do, just like anything. Obviously ditch the buds that are contaminated. But Jorge Cervantes, he taught me, a lot of people wash their bud when they take down, but he taught me a trick of adding a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to your bath. So literally you take down, you soak, and then you wash off and hang dry outside, and then bring it in to go through your process. And that does get off a lot of those contaminants and such that exist in the plant. So that's something that I've done to help kind of improve, making sure as far as if there's anything on the plant. But those things surprised me, man, because like I said, I didn't see anything. I even netted my grow one year just to protect it from some of the big, the bigger pests. Yeah. Obviously you can't keep everything out, but trying to keep the bigger bugs out of my outdoor grow. And they can get past that too. It's insane. It's crazy how much this plant attracts certain bugs.
Oh man, that's what I like. For the new growers out there, be ready for that, because everything loves cannabis, man. Yes. Everything. I've only done one outdoor grow. This one subject that's not on the questions, but since you're a mostly outdoor grower, I have to ask you, since I got you. Yeah. My first outdoor grow, I grew two plants. I think it was Sunday Driver and something else, but they came out really good. Really good. But I'm more of an indoor grower because I'm about taste, right? But I feel like if I went for a specific outdoor strain, cultivar, that I would get better results. Would you concur with that? Do you think that that's something?
100%. That's where it surprises me, and I don't mean to be critic. I have enough friends back home in NorCal that have their own kind of opinions on what they grow and what they cycle. Mm-hmm. But I'm a huge proponent of people actually looking at genetics and going back to the core. Look back at the land race. Obviously, if you're in a hotter climate, then you might want to look at more of the ties and more of those sativas that really stretch and love the heat. Okay. As opposed to doing something that's a little more indica dom that might like the cooler temperates and such. So I try to be cognizant of that. Again, I'm with you. I don't have time to geek out in the gym. That's why I have friends like James Loud and Ben over at Humble Seed Co. Like I've got the friends that geek out on that. Yeah. But I did get friend Peter Cerveri from Future Canvas Project. He's like, hey, we're running some F1s for Coastal Seed Co. out of Santa Cruz. And this dude's really cool old head. And usually has some pretty good flavors. I'm like you. I'm a terpy guy. Like I don't need the loud 30, 40% THC. I need the 5 or 6% terpenes. That's what I know really steers the high, which is a whole other thing. And he gave me a Zihuatanejo cross with a Thai, which, that's a tropic and subtropic. Like you've got this plant that really loves the heat. And I'm like, I don't know, Southern California, we're pretty ambient. We're usually around 70, 75 in the summer. But I went with it and it worked out because we had like a super hot summer where we're hitting triple digits. It was crazy, man, especially like late into so late. Speaking of that, I was trying to go term to November based on when I dropped, and it started hitting like 114, 115. And I'm literally only like, as a crow flies, like 20 minutes from the ocean. I don't know where you're at, but I'm like, I'm in Ventura County, so I'm not that far. Yeah. And dude, like I saw that literally the trikes went from like clear to amber to cloud overnight. Like I was just like, how quick can I take these down? It was absolutely insane. But if I had something that wasn't more so accustomed to hotter climates, I know I would have lost it altogether. I definitely would have been out. So it does matter in what you grow. And you might be like, man, I really want to try. I mean, there's some good crosses right now. A lot of guys are getting back into like not just Blue Dream, but like Blue Diamond. And I see some Sour Blue crosses coming back out of NorCal and Southern Oregon. But be cognizant, like don't chase the loud, don't chase the trending. Look at what works best based on your environment. And that's where I'm jealous of. I call them God growers, man, because I depend on Mother Nature. Like you get to play, oh, this is my humidity, this is my ambient temperature, this is my light cycle. Like you guys really get to, I mean, I wouldn't even be using autos or fems if indoor. I'd be like, I can control it all, but you have a little bit more flexibility in that where you can recreate that. Oh, it's a higher humidity plant. I'm going to start pumping it. If it's not, I'm going to bring it down. Yep.
Because when I had taken that plant, like inside, it came out beautiful. And don't get me wrong, the buds were gorgeous, and it was just an experience. For all the new growers out there, I highly recommend, if you have the space, to grow outside. Okay, because there are a lot of rules and everything too that come with that. You don't want to be able to have your plants be seen from the street. I think that's just like a straight, that's just like a city ordinance. Like, don't do that. Okay, so make sure you put up walls or whatever you got to do. People can't see it, but you got to experience this because it is totally different. The sun is like what the plants were made for. So they grow bigger, they grow badder, they grow just hungrier. You got to feed more. And I had mine in like a 30-gallon pot. So it weighed.
Jeez, man.
Yes. I was definitely doing what I usually do. Is I just dive right into something.
Yeah, you just went big, man.
And so I went big. And since I knew what I was doing on how to grow and how to train, I just trained her right and, put a little trellis little thing around her to keep her in. And I got at least, I think, about 3 pounds out of that with 2 plants.
Nice.
It was very beautiful. I was overwhelmed. I had never done anything like that before, so I needed to get a rack because I didn't do the whole plant. The whole plant was too big at that point.
Oh yeah, you can't. Yeah, you got to part out at that point. Yeah, for
sure.
Yeah.
So and I didn't know, should I hang it outside? It's summertime. It's gonna dry too quick. What am I gonna do? Yeah. I got all these popcorns and all this stuff over here to trim. Like, it was overwhelming for my little grower, So it's definitely an experience. But I do feel like that is where it should be, though. If we can get the genetics that are outdoor grown or meant for outdoor, like, oh man, because the sun, there's nothing like the sun.
It's tough to beat. And then in the technology, I'd say the two biggest contenders as far as for the LED technology right now are probably Fos and Fluence. Fos being out of North America, Fluence being out of Europe. Influence tied to Philips, so obviously they have much deeper pockets for their R&D budget. But both those guys, they've brought that whole UV to the spectrum into the equation for LED, which is a big game changer. So you guys can create more of that traditional canopy cover as far as your lighting. But exactly to your point, man, there's something. I'll give an example. A buddy of mine, Walter, and Judy, they own Soul Spirit Farms, which is up in Trinity, which everyone knows the Emerald Triangle, but most people only know Humboldt, maybe Mendocino. Trinity's the third county of the triangle.
Okay.
And so these guys are out off the river up there. They happen to be in a place. It's really nice because the way their property is, it's kind of graded already with a tilt towards afternoon sun. But as Walter explains it, there's almost like a hole in the atmosphere. We always talked about this, like being an 80s kid, you always used to hear, oh, you can put a hole in the, in the atmosphere with all the hairspray, stop using Aquanet, all that shit, like you remember, dude. Yeah. So that is one thing he points out. He's like, for some reason, we've measured it. The UV is so much more intense right here where we set up the grow. And his flower is fire. There's very few that grow that I can't finish a J. In his, because I'll be like out in my garden, and I'm kind of a snooer, so I don't like store-bought. I only smoke other people's that are friends and I know they're grow and they're organic and all. Dude, his stuff is loud, and it is the terpenes. I mean, obviously he has the cannabinoids on point, but he just has that right formula, and he knows how to manipulate the sun in his favor to really maximize. But like you said, dude, I'm the same as you. Like, I was just talking to a friend while out there on the island, and I was like, I feel bad, man, because I love edibles too, and I usually take my popcorn, my smaller bits, and I used to make butter, but now I'm too lazy. I just make oil. But I'm like, dude, half the time, like my trim, I throw on the bonfire. And everyone's like, really? You don't? And I'm like, dude, when you're growing outdoor, to your point, I don't flat top. I'm like all natural, man. I just let it go. And my neighbor behind me is a Vietnam vet, so he's cool. My neighbor next door, his kid trims. He's in the industry. He's cool. So I'm not too worried about it. My other neighbor's too old. He's in his 80s. And so I don't normally cap it, and anyone that comes on my property, like, my lawnmower guy or my painter or whatever, like, that's how I pay them. So they're cool. But dude, like these got to 10 foot and I had to top them. I'm like, I can't, to your point, I can't go any higher because now they're going to start seeing them from their backyard, So it is a different place. It's a little, you can still manipulate. You can still obviously top it. I mean, you can top a plant 100 times. You can trellis it. You can get trick. I love what you're talking about, caging, especially outdoor. Ed does that. Ed Rosenthal. He's a big fan of really constraining it and then allowing it to fully bouquet out once you get into flower. So there's different ways you can do it, but yeah, be prepared because you're very dependent on the environment.
Yes, guys, that's one thing that is just it's a different game. It's a whole different game, and like it's not as hard. I feel it's easier almost. It's almost easier because the sun just it does its thing. But the washing the buds technique, that's one thing that I feel that when you're doing outdoor that you should do because there are all those contaminants. Now I did do that. I washed my buds and man, there was caterpillars, spiders. It's just like I said,
a sheet of oil, man, just from the environmental dust, dirt.
Dust, yes, dust because they're trichomes. These trichomes are very sticky. They grab onto things, and especially if you're going to fire, it's really sticky. So, you got all these things. But the cool thing is, for those who don't know, if you are washing your buds, the mature trichomes will stay on. So when you dump it in the water, don't be scared. Don't think, the trichomes are going to come off or anything because they won't. They'll stay on. The ones that will fall off, though, are the immature ones.
Brittle.
That will break off. But the mature ones will stay on. So you actually have a better buds, I feel, after you're done washing. But also, one mistake that I did one year that I think maybe that year, is I didn't turn on my fan when I hung it up. And so I put it in my tent and I could have sworn I turned on my fan, but I didn't. And so I came in and I opened up and I was like, it smells musty. Once you got the must, you're already screwed, man. Yeah. But I was turn on the fan real quick and I let it dry, got it all the way. And most of them were good, but then there was some buds. I cracked it open and there was mold and I had to throw away 6 ounces of weed. Oh my God, that was so that was a hard one for me. I had to have my son do it because my son doesn't care about weed. So he was just like, throw it away. I'm like, yes, please. Just do it, son. Do it. And he dumped it, put it back in. Here you go. Here's your jars, Dad. I'm like, oh my God, you're so ruthless. How'd you do that?
It's tough because you spend weeks, months. I mean, I'll put down usually, next month, March is when and some guys, especially again, NorCal, they'll do 2 turns. They'll do an early and late. And I'll put down in March and then the plant will tell me when it's done. And to your point, so you got months and it's therapeutic. I'm with you. Like I get up, the older I get, the more early I get up. Crazy. You turn into your parents, but like I'm up at 6 a.m. out there in the garden. It's just my moment of Zen before I get stuck with this. Right. And so I love it. I enjoy it. But week in, week out, month in, month out, you spend all this time and energy. And then it comes down to that, and rather it be budworms or mold. It's like, oh, man, it's the sacrifice, It's the sacrifice.
So definitely learning experience. But all right, let's get to the questions. Here's one of my first questions that I always ask everybody is, how did you guys come up with the Grove Bag name?
That's an interesting one. So Jack, who's our founder, who's also a grower, he's a caregiver for his older brother. And that's how he came up with this technology. He had a background in packaging. And they're like, well, we need a name. And he was kind of rushed. And I think it was actually the individual is helping him kind of set up the business. That was like, well, Grover, what about, everything grows in groves. So why not play off the name? So his last name is Grover. And so he went with Grove Bags. And I kind of like it. It's fitting. We put a lot more emphasis on the terp block because that's our technology. And we do know that we will eventually become like a house of brands because while I am true again, a connoisseur, we have friends in the business that are into like more of the psychedelic, more of this. So it's like, hey, what about technology for that? What about technology for hops? Because that's the only cousin to the cannabis plant. Like, so we know that, hey, let's focus on for this specific category terp block. So you'll see a lot of times it's terp block powered by Grove bags because we want to put this specific technology for this specific plant first and foremost. So
So for those who don't know out there, hops where you make beer, or they add flavor to the beer.
Yes.
Hops are a cousin of cannabis. So that's why when we're talking about HLVD, we're talking about hop latent viral disease. Now, it started in hops, and since they're cousins and they're closely related, it jumped from hops to cannabis, and now that's why we had to deal with that, and everybody was calling it the COVID of cannabis, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about that in previous episodes. Go back and look at the other episodes, and you'll know about that. But
yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Who knows when that happened? We still don't know, to your point, man. Like, we don't know when the plant said, I'm going to express inward for hemp and outward for cannabis sativa L. Like, somewhere centuries ago, this plant is just like, you go your way, I go mine. But to your point, so many people don't realize if you allowed a hop to actually blossom outward, it looked like a bud.
Yes, and they do. And that's what the beautiful thing, because I used to work for a brewery. And so one of the things that I loved weed, I've loved weed my whole life, like adult life. But when I went and worked at that brewery, I went into the back one day and they had the big bag of hops.
Oh, nice.
Oh my God, it was beautiful. I went in there and I just started smelling them. I'm like, it's like weed. They all have their different terps. It's absolutely cool, man. So cool. Now, they were just using regular old garbage bags. If they would have had the terp blocks back then,
that's it.
That would have been something. Now, do you guys make that big of a size of bags? What's the biggest size you guys make?
Yeah, the biggest size we make right now is a 5 kilo or a 10 pound, which is huge overseas. But we did at one point when the Farm Bill of 2018 passed. We had a lot of people in the hemp space that are like, hey, I need to store. So we had something called the Super Sack, which held, my gosh, I want to say it was closer to like 100 pounds or something. It was insane. It was a huge, same technology, because everything we make, this substrate that we use, rather the terp block be black or white or clear, it's all the same technology as far as these layers of polymer. But that is a huge bag. And even like I said, even some of the larger boys that use us over across the pond, like the most they'll store is typically 5 kilos. They'll do batches about, and it's a good, when people see, I love it, man. We put it out, in front of the expo floor, when we're setting up our booth. And you always have guys come, dude, I got a picture of that. Let me pick it. It'd be so dope if it's full of weed. And I'm like, if we were back in California, I can make that happen. Not here, man. So, but it's a dope bag. We actually had, who was it? Joey Bravo from Respect My Region. He asked me to send him one so he could turn it into a Halloween costume. So he was a big weed bag, a big terp block weed bag last Halloween, man. It was dope. So it's cool.
Sick. Cool. So for the viewers and everybody out there, or me too, could you explain the way that it works? How does it work? What is the technology behind it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's really interesting because it's a modified atmospheric packaging, and not to geek out too much, but all of us have experienced that. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and bought ready-made salad, a lot of people assume that ready-made salad, in order for the lettuce to stay crisp and the radish and the carrots and the celery to remain crunchy, a lot of people assume that they flush it with a noble gas like nitrogen or argon, which is something they do in the chips, right? They actually inject that in the chips to keep them fresh, and then also to inflate the bag to protect them from breaking. Okay. So that's something that doesn't have a noble gas. It's actually just a modified atmospheric package. So we took that and said, okay, what if we engineered this for this plant? Because the big difference between, I'll pick on lettuce. Lettuce is over 95% water. Only 5% is actual plant tissue or biomass. So that is the technology that they incorporate into that packaging so that it would maintain this much higher moisture content. Whereas, because it sounds like a lot, Sly, like anything over 65% RH is a danger zone, or 14.5% moisture content, right? Depending on which way you measure, bound or free water. So that was the trick for us, was like we had to re-engineer it. It took a lot of time and money to be able to balance this more so 58 to 62, which is pretty ideal. And I'll tell you, I keep hygrometers in my bag. Like I don't know, as a home grower, I always use our 1/4 pound bags. These are like a perfect size. and I'll put a hygrometer, and they have a clear bottom, which is kind of nice. So this one not, but in this batch, I have a bag with one. So I'll put a hygrometer on the bottom, and then I just pick it up. Mine always hang right about 59% relative humidity. And I'm keeping it at cellar temperature. It's what we recommend is, that 60 to 70 degrees. So if you have a dark closet, you don't have to worry about, to your point, doesn't matter if it's a damp or high moisture closet, because that's part of the beauty too, is it balances that moisture, but it passively pushes it out, but doesn't necessarily actively pull it in. So that's why they love us in Thailand and Jamaica and Hawaii, where they're constantly battling with this high humidity, man. I mean, like crazy humidity. And I won't say who, but I used to work for a company that made active atmospheric modifiers, little humidity packs. And I went out there, this probably like 6 or 7 years ago. And one guy's like, I've been using the same humidity pack for 2.5 years. Is it still good? And I'm like, yeah, dude, because you've got more moisture in the environment than you do in the pack. Okay. This is a market where you don't really need humidity packs, dude. Like if you were in the middle of the desert, especially the high desert like Vegas, where the ambient relative humidity is like 10, 15% on average.
That's how it is here.
Yeah, exactly, man. And people think, to your point, not having moisture is dry, but having a lot of moisture can be dry too, which is exactly the PNW. People don't realize Colorado is the same way because the altitude, it's super dry. So
we're over here where I'm at. I'm on the east side, so I'm not on the west side of Washington. So over here is extreme weather, and so we get our humidity is almost like about 10% in summertime, almost even lower sometimes. It gets really hot, no water, you have to add, sometimes I'll even throw in some other packs so that I could get humidity in it if I accidentally dry it too much or whatever, because, you got to keep an eye on it over here. We just don't have humidity like that. But to your point, in some places where you do have the humidity, now you have too much, that's where the mold can happen. You got problems, and too much humidity is not good. I think it's fascinating the way that it can keep the 58 to 62%. Now, can you overstuff the bag?
That's a great question, man. You definitely can. So like, again, you'll notice that this is a QP, but you notice it's not packed full to the top. This actually is a lighter bag. But that's a great question. Yes, for the technology to work, and just to back up really quick, so like we talked about, you take down, you whole plant or whole stem, whatever your conventional bucket, hang it, let it dry for, I usually do 60, 60, 14. So 60% relative humidity. I'm spoiled. I get it, but keep around 60% humidity, 60 degrees, and then for about 2 weeks. So you kind of do a slow, even dry. So what you should see in your room, and again, just put a Govee hygrometer in your closet or your dry room, but you should see it kind of gradually step down on the humidity along the way too. So maybe you start at 60 and end at 50. That's totally fine. Then you trim it, put it in our bags. And the trick is not filling the bag up over 75%, because it does need that headspace. So something that really tripped me out, and I'll never be a person to say I know it all. Like, the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. That's my mantra. So I try to learn something new every day. Something I learned coming on with this company 3 years ago now is that the plant does a lot, right? It's still an enigma. We're still trying to figure it out. Like Israel, they're the leader of both scientific and medical study of this plant. They're constantly uncovering new cannabinoids, even new terpenoids. So it's really trippy how much we still have to learn. But with this plant, the thing that surprised me was that when you take it from its life force, traditionally when it's living, it takes in CO2, puts out oxygen. That's why we love trees. That's why we love all these plants. When it's dead, you would think, oh, well, then now it's not going to be able to reproduce oxygen. It reproduces a minute percentage of oxygen because technically it's still living and it's not fully dead. Like, we think, oh, you cut off the head and the body falls over, it dies. Like, we're thinking like plants don't work that way. They still try to regenerate. So they put out a little bit of oxygen, but they put out a lot of CO2 to try to regenerate. So that's what this does as well. So while it balances that relative humidity, it retains the CO2 in the environment and pushes out the excessive oxygen. And so that's what creates that perfect space for curing. It has that rich CO2, very, very minor amount of oxygen, so you can get a little bit of oxygenation so you can have the terpenes mature. But that's really what's retained in there as well. And then a few other attributes, they're anti-static, antimicrobial. The clear bags have a UV layer. So a lot of guys are like, yeah, I've switched to you guys because I don't like glass because it lets in the UV. Well, you can even get our clear bags because that has a UV layer, of course, on the outside, so that helps too. So it's it's a pretty next level, and it's definitely technology for the win. So we say we're a technology company in the packaging space. And people are like, oh, you do packaging. And I'm like, no, we do technology, but it comes in a package.
Packaging. Yeah. That's crazy. You guys have thought of it all. Man,
yeah, it took some time, man. But again, when you're a company that's a bunch of growers, because I'd say at least a quarter of our company, we're not a big company, but at least a quarter of our company is, dude, what a difference. Because a lot of those other companies, and I worked for a few of them, they're coming from another space and they're taking a technology that was designed for cigars or designed
tobacco.
for fill tobacco, like, and they reapply it over here. And it's like, dude, that's not the same. Like tobacco, you don't have to be a cigar smoker, but like tobacco, you can keep any relative humidity because the one thing that kills off any sort of microbial growth is nicotine. Like it literally has a natural resistance against microbials and mold because they hate nicotine. It's a bad chemical to these things to procreate. So you can keep your sticks, as they call them, at like 70, 80, 85%. You're fine. You're not getting mold, but not the case with weed, as we know.
No.
Can't get into that danger zone, man. Exactly.
So that really brings an element to the company that I like personally. I really like, because I love companies who are growers for making grower stuff for growers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, from the community for the community, dude. It's our internal mantra.
Beautiful, man. And I've been using jars from the beginning of my grow. I've been growing for about 5 years now. I got the bug and I actually did like, I've done pretty good for myself, which I feel, to my own horn, I did pretty nice. But anyways, I was stuck with the jars, and I've been doing jars. I used some burp lids is that they're called right now. So now, for those who don't know what a burp lid is, it is a lid that has a little plastic plunger or something to where you could connect the plunger and you could suck all the air out. You suck all the air out, and then you just move this little thing and it lets the new air in. Now, I've been doing that forever, but recently I just went to MjBiz Con this year, and I've heard a lot about grow bags. I've heard about them. I just didn't know. I was like, I was one of those people that's like, really? Does it really work? But Pitches 420, all these other people in the community have been standing by your product. So when I saw you guys at MJ, I was like, hello, I need to go talk to them. So I went up, you guys sent over all these samples, and now I am 100% hooked. I'm ready to throw my next harvest, because I just got back to growing. I was out there for a little bit, but now that I'm back, I'm totally going to try these out. Yeah. My whole harvest is going in some grow bags. Yeah, the mold prevention, it's static proof and mold proof?
Yeah, so there's multiple layers. So the inner layer is the anti-static, and then there's a layer that essentially prevents allowing that environment to occur for the growth of. We've had some people like, and it's very rare, but to your point, it might be a novice grower that doesn't know. There's like, I still had mold. And we ask them, we're like, what was the moisture content, or what was the relative humidity? Because again, not everyone has a moisture meter, and that's a kind of tangent education. Moisture content is the bound water that's within the flower. And the best analogy I've ever come up with is it's like comparing to a sponge. Like if you probed a sponge, you could wring it out, which is totally fine. Most of those do. You're done doing your dishes, you wring it out because you don't want it to smell moldy. Yeah. So you wring it out, you set it up. Not all the moisture is out of that sponge. There's still, if you were to probe into the middle, you'd still find that there's a relatively high moisture content. Might only be 10 to 20%, but there's still moisture there, even if the outside feels pretty much dry. So that's moisture content. So your bound water, you need to keep it in check. Like we recommend going into the bags between 10 and 12% moisture content. So if you're using a moisture meter, which most growers are at least up to the processing phase, then you know where it's at. If you're on a budget, you don't have, and we're actually testing some newer, lower price moisture meters right now. But if you're like, hey, I can only afford a hygrometer, like a little Govee that tells me the relative humidity, which is the unbound water, the ambient moisture in that environment, rather be in a jar or in a bag, then you can definitely use that as well. But just keep in mind, you'd want to put the biomass into our bags between 50 and 60% relative humidity. So again, you kind of want to start out, because it's also, again, it's passive, it's not active. So if you put it in too wet, just like anything, you're going to be in a predicament, because it doesn't have a built-in like desiccant, which would be an active atmospheric modifier that would take that excessive moisture out of it. It can only wick so much. So
Yeah, so it's not a miracle. It's not a miracle.
Correct.
So don't go, for everybody out there, don't go throwing in your freshly wet buds.
That's what people ask me. They're like, so I can just cut down and throw it in here. We're like, man, if we come up with that, and don't get me wrong, we're constantly trying to come up with new technology, man.
We're trying to figure it out.
That's a tough one, dude. It's seriously tough because you're almost forced to really use an active atmospheric modifier. Like you almost really, but then how do you turn that desiccant off to not wick out excessive? To stop at 50% or stop at 55%, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but we're not giving up, just like other things that we're coming up with. We've got fresh frozen. One of the big ones, not to go on a tangent and plug, but I sincerely, especially for anyone who wants to save their flower for an even more extended amount of time, because this crop's from 2 seasons ago. So I heat seal the top of mine. We say for at least a year, but we've had some that have been in bags for 3 or 4 years. I keep my reserves heat sealed in our bags. So that's one thing. We came out with a solution, and especially anybody that happens to be, say, moving product from A to B and doesn't have the time to take over their tent room and go through the full dry and cure, right? So we came up with Safe Vac, and it was not easy, but we were able to incorporate this technology into a material that can be vacuum sealed. So a lot of the guys are loving that because they're not like, oh, I got to wait and let it sit here and cure before I can just say share with friends on the other side of the state, right? So what you can do is you can actually take it down from dry, trim it, put it in the Safe Vac, vacuum seal it, and then it will cure in that environment for the next week, 2 weeks, month, 2 months, as long as you keep it in there. So that's a pretty dope technology that, again, I feel like it's one of the most underrated products of ours. And there's a cool hack that we don't promote because we do have a fresh frozen bag. But dude, if you want to prevent freezer burn, that's another one for the win. Like that Safe Vac bag, you can throw that in the freezer if you're going to squeeze later. Yeah, you're totally fine from freezer burn. So I personally, again, just like you're kind of like, hey, I'm going to do my next crop. My next grow this season, I'm going to take half of it. I'm going to Safe Vac it. And then the other half, I'm going to turp lock and see what it is. Because in theory, when you Safe Vac, and you mentioned this, dude, with the burping jars, the only downside of the burping jar is you're reintroducing fresh oxygen into that environment, which oxygen, everyone knows oxygen oxidation comes from oxygen. So putting that new oxygen in there is not necessarily a good thing. So the theory I have is that you're starting out with a zero oxygen environment. So that curing space, because it does pillow up because the flower off gases. So you vacuum, you crush your buzz, but you vacuum seal it. It looks like a typical kind of vacuum sealed in. It'll pillow up just a little bit as the plant off gases, but that creates the perfect environment. So you're starting out with a highly depleted oxygen environment to start, and then all cure from there with a high CO2 rich environment. And like I said, not to geek out, but I can't wait to try that myself because I think that's going to be the next game changer.
So cool. Don't worry about geeking out because this whole show is about teaching people. And that's what I kind of am. I'm like, hey man, I love education. I love knowledge. I love being able to bring this knowledge to the people and teach everybody, because one thing that I don't like is people not knowing, like you should know these little things, especially if you're going. And don't get me wrong, everybody out there, if you don't know, you don't know, and it's not your fault. It's not your, don't beat yourself up because you don't know it. If you don't know, you don't know. So that's why I'm here to try to bring it to everybody. Now I wanted to talk about second skin. So for those who get tattoos out there, second skin is basically what a grow bag is. Almost the same technology. I think it is. When you get a tattoo nowadays, you can get a tattoo and they'll cover it with this plastic. Instead of doing just saran wrap, you have this sticker. It's almost like a sticker, and it's called second skin. And you put it on your skin, and it catches the plasma and everything that's coming out of your tattoo, but it also lets it breathe. And no contaminants in, which is beautiful, beautiful. And so pretty much the same thing like I hear is it lets all these gases out that's happening in curing out of the bag, and it's just keeping that CO2 and everything, like all the good stuff, the stuff that you want inside of the bag. So
that's a great, man. I'm gonna have to use it because, to be candid, the only other expression I hear, and I hear it a lot from the Germans when I'm out there, is they compare it to Gore-Tex. Which is similar to your point. Like it allows to create, when you wear Gore-Tex, like it allows to create that perfect environment as far as heat and low moisture, but still allows it to breathe but keeps the ice cold and the snow and the rain out at the same time from your jacket or your pants or whatever Gore-Tex material you're wearing. But I like the second skin, man, because I haven't gotten ink in years, to be honest. And
Really?
so I have seen people wearing that, and I'm like, dude, that's not saran wrap. That's like, because old school, to your point, we didn't even use saran wrap. It's just ointment. And then it finally graduated into saran wrap, and then now I'm seeing this stuff that looks pre-cut. I'm like, what is that?
Yes, that is second skin, and that's the beauty. It changed me getting tattoos. I get tattoos all over, so the people in the tattoo industry know about this, you know. And there's some other stuff like tattoo armor, where it's kind of the sticker, but it's more of a, oh man, I want to say like it kind of looks like a pee pad or something, and it soaks up the plasma. And all the plasma and everything goes on the pad, so you can't see your tattoo or anything. That's the bad side of tattoo armor. But with second skin, you can still look at your tattoo. You can see everything through it, so you can see what's happening and it healing and all that. And so it's, man, stupid cool. You probably won't go get another tattoo in a while, but if you do, make sure to ask the tattoo artist for second skin. Be like,
never know,
because and you can go ahead and use that as an example too, because now the younger generation, they'll know what you're talking about. Second skin, I know what that is.
Cool. That was cool, man. I like it.
Let's see. So I was starting to ask a bunch of questions about your travel, because you get to travel, and you get to go promote this company and this bag, this great stuff. So, and it's taking you, like we said earlier, that it's taking you places that you didn't think that you would ever go, right? Yeah. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions on that, to touch a little bit, like how where has this taken you? Like, has it taken you all over the world?
Yeah, man, it's taken me, and I am going to write a book. I started writing an article series for MG Magazine, MG Retailer, during COVID, because I was kind of had that. COVID forced me to be grounded, which was insane, because 2018 I did 46 expos, trade shows, events around the world, and then 2019 I think I was down to like 38, and then 2020 obviously I just got a handful in, and then boom, that was it. And so it kind of gave me pause, and I'm like, I need to start writing about all these places I've gone to, because, I'm in my 40s. So I would have been dope to do this when I was in my 20s or 30s, when I was a young guy, single guy, free, didn't have a care, but I still very much appreciated the places it had taken me and the things I had learned. Because the one thing that I discovered in my travels was, there's a lot of things that are universal in general sense, but there's some specific things that are really cool when you look at them from a universal standpoint. One's food. The other's music, which I love. World Beat. I mean, I already was an EDI Ice DJ in high school and college, so I'm already a huge fan of World Beat. But music is definitely a universal language, and so is weed. Like, everywhere I went, the culture So to answer your question, I've been to Bangkok, Thailand for the plant. I've been to all across Australia. I've been down to Santiago, Chile. I've been obviously up to Canada.
Quick question. How is the Thailand market? Because they just went completely recreational, right?
Yeah, they went 2 years ago this month is when it really kind of opened the floodgates for legalization. You had a little bit more, we'll say a less conservative party in parliament, right? Which was pretty uniform around the world. It's kind of interesting how the US and a lot of American citizens are so focused, and they think we're the best and we're the only and we're the this. And I hate to break it, but we're not. There's some beautiful countries, even ones next. Mexico, don't believe the hype. There's some serious beauty about that in history about that country. It's the fourth largest city in the world, Mexico City. We've got a phenomenal neighbor to the south, and they've got a lot of history at the plant too. So it is really crazy, man. Thailand, they just opened the floodgates. And already, specifically, Bangkok was kind of this epicenter for tourism. I had a lot of friends that either go to Bali or Bangkok, up from Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania. And when Bangkok opened up the floodgates, man, I went there that January, and I went the same week that Gilbert Berner opened his cookies location. One of my buddies is, he's a good guy, man. And my buddy Josh from Natura is his right hand, and just awesome dudes. And Josh has ties to Thailand because of his wife's Thai. And so that really motivated them to open up there. But man, it really is the term or expression for that country is a land of 1,000 smiles, 100%. Super friendly people, seriously sincere. Just the food, the whole kind of mindset, the respect to tradition, which is something you see a lot more in Asia. But you could find dispensaries everywhere, man. It was insane. Like we went to eat one of our first days. We were staying not far from the Nana, which is kind of right down the heart of Bangkok. And we're in this restaurant, and they had built in a dispensary like to the restaurant with its own door from the street. Okay. So I'm looking over and I'm seeing like a full-on dispensary, dude, in Asia. That's something that I would never imagine in my lifetime to see. So it definitely opened up. And there was, to talk a little bit more of the traditional market, there's still stuff from here around the world. I run into California genetics and California flower on every continent that I go to. And so even friends, I had a friend in Fan Deep that had a dispensary, kind of more pop-up dispensary. And I was seeing some very familiar brands. And I'm like, man, are these knockoffs? These legit? He's like, no, I'm an importer too. I'm like, dude, that's insane. Wow. So while they grow some great local stuff, they supply too. So yeah, with the new parliament, it's a lot more conservative, just like the new German party, a lot more conservative. The trains already left the station though, man. Like I know some big growers out there, like Greenhouse, the guys from Strain Hunters, they've got Arjan's got a big operation out there. They aren't slowing down. It's already left the station. So they might pull it back into medical, which is something that Germany's doing right now. Germany's like, hey, we'll allow the CSCs, as we call them, the cannabis social clubs. And I just got the latest list today. There's a couple hundred on that list, but they're talking about taking away home grow. So it's like they might take a little of the fun away, but at least they're not taking the plan away and going, hey, we're going back into the dark ages.
Yeah, prohibition times, and just where it's just ridiculous because like the way that the world is starting to open up to cannabis is just about time, guys. Come on, this plant, like really the prohibition that even started this was bullshit. And so now, we're getting back to being able to use this plant as the medicinal plant that it is, man. The thing that brings people together, this plant that is just actually saving lives and shit, man. Like
it really is. And you see that, dude. That's a good thing you point out. It is. People don't understand how much of a this is incorporated into religion in India, where they call it bang, right? It's a drink during the high religion holidays. And so it's something that's been incorporated. And then you go to Asia and you'll have a grandma that's growing her ginseng and her turmeric and her ginger in a cannabis plant. And now, again, they're not conventional, not like you and I know, but like they put it in soups. They put it in teas. And that's something that's an herbalistic remedy for them, just like any of those other plants I mentioned. They don't segregate and chastise it. So that's another thing that surprises me. A good example would be in Prague, specifically in the Czech Republic. Prague has a event every year called CannaFest, not to be confused with CannaFest up in NorCal. But that event, you go in, dude, they've got a pop-up daycare. And I walk in, I took pictures of it. I don't want to be a creepy dude, but I was like, I took pictures to share with friends just to show that this is what normalization looks like. Because if you or I don't care if it's MjBiz or a Champ Show or CannaFest or Hall of Flowers, if you saw a daycare on site on that property, within 5 minutes, Child Protective Services, CPC would be all over that. Like, they can't be in this environment. They can't be no, they're in a very contained, sequestered area with caregivers that are certified and licensed. Like that to me is like an aha. It's crazy how much the Western civilization has weaponized this plant. And that's what I speak a lot about too, man. Like you named it. Technically the prohibition goes back to the Napoleon days, but we won't go back that far. We'll go back just the US history. They literally weaponized this plant against Hispanic and blacks. And that's absolutely bullshit, man. Like the fact that they wanted to use it to prevent certain groups from being able to vote and have a voice as residents of this country. It's just mind boggling, man. And the problem about this country versus other countries is it's a stubborn country, man. Like as long as those blue hairs, I hate to pick on them because I'm getting grazed from being around too much, but those guys in DC, man, they won't let go of the Dare days. They won't let go of the Anslinger days from back in the beginning, or even the Nixon days, the war on drugs in 71. Like it's crazy how this country just won't accept that maybe it made the wrong choice. Maybe this shouldn't be illegal because maybe they should put more of a focus on fentanyl or opioids, or, I don't know, pharmaceuticals that kill more people than this plant ever has.
Right.
It's just not to go on a tangent, but again, that's what I like about the travel. So yeah, I definitely am thankful. Like I said, if you get a chance, you can literally just Google, Lance Lambert, MG. And I've done articles on the Thailand market, the Australian market, the New Zealand market, Israeli market,
Now
Spain,
this one that blows my mind. I did not know Israel was one of the leading researchers. I had no idea about that. That totally changes. Like, wow, I didn't know. It's just beautiful that the rest of the country or the rest of the world is starting to wake back up and getting into the the medical of it.
Yeah,
I mean, and on top of it, there's money there too. I mean, in real. United States is really bad at saying my bad.
Yes.
You're really bad at just apologizing. And
we messed up.
Hey, we messed up. Okay, now let's just move on. No, there's none of that right here. But if there could be, just imagine if there could be, man. I forgot where I was going with that.
No, but you're right, man. It's when people hear the term the big three, traditionally that's been talking about like GM, Ford, Dodge, or Chrysler. That's the auto. The big three I talk about in my writing is talking about pharmaceuticals, tobacco, alcohol. And I wrote an article on that too. Like people are like, oh, they're going to come in, they're going to take it over. I'm like, dude, they've been in the scene since the first market legalized in 2014. Like people don't know that Philip Morris has a huge amount of investment in this. All the celestial, like all the alcohol brands, they all have investments in this. It's like it's already pharmaceutical. GW, here's a fun fact for you, man. GW Pharmaceuticals, which was the largest pharmaceutical group out of England, they got acquired by Jazz Pharmaceuticals, which was the largest pharmaceutical group out of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Those guys, they actually have a medicine that was approved by the FDA, the Food Drug Administration, as a legal medicine for grand mal and epileptic seizures. That's available in this market that uses biomass source cannabinoids, which means it's not a synthetic, it's natural. So how is it, I mean, I know how, it's a rhetorical question. How is it a big pharmaceutical company can come out, and this is, they brought this product years ago. This has been around for just less than a decade. How can they legally bring in something that's a Schedule I drug that is proven in our market to not have any therapeutic or medical value and can be habitual, addictive, blah, 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 blah. But blah, blah, blah. It's all money, man. It's just, it's really crazy, really crazy. So
really, it's all, I mean, really just comes down to money and not wanting to say my bad. That's it. That's it. Thinking, and like the California market, they've shown how the California market has shown not to do it, because they're taxing too much. They're taxing too fucking much. And now everybody's moving to Oklahoma, and I think it might be Oklahoma where their motto is "We're not California." Like,
they're starting to crack down because it got, they like Oregon, your neighbors, our neighbors, love them, love Oregon. I'm going to eventually
love Oregon. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, that is the hippie state. I'm a huge fan, but like, that's the mistake that Oregon made. I was in Colorado when adult use, that's where I cut my teeth in the legal market, then Washington, then your state came on. Oregon was the next. In Oregon went limitless license. In my opinion, that is the most greediest of a government to do because they're placating to extreme capitalism. So they're saying, okay, everyone gets a license. Whoever gets a license, the strongest survive, but we get our money up front. But the problem is that saturates the market, brings the value down. Dude, I remember I was in Eugene. I did I call them Oregon Trail tours, but I go up every year and tour that market, visit friends. Because I have friends that defected from the Triangle up into South, Medford, Eugene, where all the grows are. Yeah. And dude, I remember I was in Eugene. Grant's a college town. I was in Eugene. This place had $50 ounces. $50 ounces, not eights. And I'm like, this is what happened. So the government got greedy and it's like, okay, we'll rake in $1 million, $500,000 in licensing, but then they're losing it all on the long game because the market's saturated and they're only getting $50 an ounce versus, I don't know, 200 an ounce, at least 100 an ounce. So that's what was disappointing about Oklahoma coming online is Oklahoma did the same thing and they did it years later. And so I had friends that are like, I just got a license for $2,500. I'm like, what are you going to do with it? You don't even know how to grow, dude. Like, what? Like, are you serious just to say you got one?
You just got a license for nothing? Like, I mean, bro, now you're just actually really just taking a license from a grower who really could have done something. Yeah. And so, and I feel like if they are throwing out all those licenses like that and they just want their money up front, of course the big fucking Philip Morrisons and shit are going to throw their money first because they got all the money. They've been balling and oh man, and then I go down the whole alcohol route. I'm just like, yo, man, alcohol is completely acceptable. Destroys lives. I was an alcoholic for 16 years, and and ever since I put down the alcohol, even we'll even throw it like this. The Grammys, I don't know if you saw the Grammys this year. Doechii is this one rapper. She went up there and she said herself, she's like, God told me, I talked to God, and God told me if I just got sober that everything would get better. And it's just like, boom, I just started bursting in tears because I felt it in my heart that if as long as you can get over the alcohol, everything will be better, man. Yep. And it's true. It's like, sorry, I get
no, dude. I'm with you. I mean, I had that epiphany in I only drank socially a couple of times a week, but to your point, from age 14 until my early 40s, when I had the epiphany too, and I'm like, wait, like alcohol is poison. Alcohol makes you forget. Alcohol makes you run and hide, whereas cannabis enhances. It makes everything better. And it's therapeutic and actually has medical benefits, whether it be pain or sleep or seizures. I mean, it's a plethora. So I had that same epiphany. It was so crazy after that, man, because I was in the thick of it on my travel. It was summer of 2019 when I was like, I'm kind of bored with this, dude. I don't think I'm about it anymore. It's just not for me. And I was continuing to travel before COVID, and I'd go to the lounge and it was free alcohol, and I'd get upgraded on the plane, or even just coach seating on an international plane is free alcohol. Then I go to all these cannabis events, an open bar. I'm like, what the fuck? Why is there an open bar? There's not free weed at an alcohol convention,
right?
I'm like, but to your point, man, it's unfortunate because it does come back to what is acceptable by society. It's acceptable in Asian society, in European society, in Latin societies, in American society. Alcohol is accepted everywhere, and it's so sad because it ruins so many lives. Everything in moderation, though. I agree with you. I'm not like hating on it. Hey, if you want to have a beer with dinner, have a glass of wine to relax, props to you. But six beers a night, 6 glasses of wine a night, that's more than just a
that's and it sneaks alcohol. Like, I don't know about you. Me, I'll say it straight up. I don't like alcohol, and I don't like people who drink alcohol. I ain't ching out. I'm just kidding. I do. But, what it is it's because it's too easy to be able to drown in it now. Because you start out and you're just having a good time. You're chilling, you're having a good time. Next thing you know, you get a little bit too stressed out. You go for that alcohol to make you feel better from being stressed out. Now, I got stressed out 2 days in a row. And then boom, boom, boom. Anyways, I do digress.
Yeah, it's chain reaction. But how many people use cannabis as an excuse for doing something stupid? They don't. Oh, I was high. But, oh, dude, I was drunk. Oh, that's okay. You slapped my ass because you're drunk. That's acceptable. Yeah. No.
But, and then it's like, yeah, I'm sorry I slapped your ass. I ate an edible. Has never came out of somebody's mouth.
Ever, man. I'll eat an edible and make new friends. That's my line.
Yes. Hey, I'm sorry I ate an edible and we had such a great time.
Yeah, exactly, man. But anyway, so yeah, it's crazy stuff. But the travels have been great. I've been very fortunate that people I've met. My network is global, and I'm so I never complain about getting, WhatsApp messages at midnight from friends in Australia, or at, 6 a.m. from friends in Germany. Like, these are all good guys, all good vibes, which is what that's what this community is good vibes and helping each other out. I tell my team it's an us and we, not an I and me movement. And it's just like, to your point, which you're referencing on that quote of like, once I gave up alcohol, I found all the good. It's the same thing with once you take that us and we approach and make it less about you or less about profit or less about and more about like this movement. That's when you really find happiness. And that's how it's been for me. People are like, you should build your brand more. I'm like, it's not about me, dude. It's about righting the wrongs and bringing legalization to the world, So.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, brother, we are at the 1 hour mark, and that went by absolutely too quickly, right?
Part 2.
I'm definitely going to have to get you on for part 2 one of these days down the road. Whenever you're done traveling, you let me know, and we'll definitely get you on part 2. For everybody out there that, once again, this is Lance Lambert. He is the marketing chief executive. I'm saying that wrong, but he's over there in Grow Bags. He is killing it. Make sure to go check him out. Where can anybody find you?
Yeah, so you can find us growbags.com, growbags and all the handles, _ for IG, because of course, like everyone else, they shut down our primary. And then myself, man, I'm always about, again, there's people reached out, some phenomenal people that I met over my life. They're like, hey, what do I need to do for this? Or how can I do that? Or what's a better way for me to get in? So you always hit me up at 805 Lance. That's my handle on IG. You can find me on LinkedIn under Lance Lambert too. But yeah, man, here there's plenty of opportunity. That's one thing I'll leave with everyone. I have friends and strangers alike. They're like, I want to get into it. I'm passionate about it, but I don't know how to grow, or I don't know how to this. I don't know how to that. And I ask them, what are you doing? I work for FedEx. Well, we need logistics people. I work security. We need security people. I work in pharmaceutical. We need people that are scientists that are studying the plant. Like, this is one industry I've been in where there's been such a wide array of necessities for expertise. Never mind like sales and marketing and business development and like guys like me. I mean, there's so many opportunities and there's so many ways to get in. Just be passionate about what you do. You don't even have to consume, man. When I was at Weed Maps, we did a study. 34% of our 400 employees didn't even consume, but they were still rock stars. They still were passionate about the plant and the movement, which is totally fine too.
Yes,
So,
it's absolutely beautiful. I love it, man. And I like to say, like, this is going to be a green rush, and like with the gold rush, the first person to get rich was the people selling the shovels. So you don't have to, you don't have to be consuming or anything. You could just be in here, like helping make content or editing, whatever your skill is. There's always room for everybody in this community. So please come in and have a great time, everybody. That's what I say. Lance, thank you so much for coming on, brother. Man. We absolutely killed it today. I hope you have safe travels, and we'll have you on for part 2 down the road, huh?
Sounds good, man. I definitely appreciate it. We'll catch up with you soon. Thanks.
All right, everybody, make sure to tap in. We're going to have another episode of CannaConvos. It's going to be recording this week also, so just be tapping in because we're going to be shooting out these episodes. All right, everybody? So have a good day. Take care. Late.